The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Could it break? For me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Of course, you're Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. We finally made it. Obviously, there's 2 more days left until the draft, but you've made it to the finish line, essentially. And it wasn't without strife. It wasn't without a lot of different ups and downs, twists and turns, rumors, mudslinging, Civil War activity. I think we've gotten to the point now, though, where everyone needs to just put your weapon down. Put your weapon down, all right? Enough fighting. I kind of feel like now we're at the point where it's feeling like those Caleb Williams stands out there who were hanging on for dear life earlier in the process when they were holding out hope that he was still available and Washington could somehow magically end up in a position to draft him. And we said, hey, y'all Caleb Williams stands. It's time to go. You tapped him on the shoulder. Hey, man, it's okay, man. It's time to go. Come on. Come on, man. No. Come on. Just come on. And eventually they realized, yeah, it's time to go. I think we've gotten to that point in the process, in the Civil War, where, hey, put your weapons down. It's time to concede. Okay? It's time to wave that white flag. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But, man, what a long process it was. We knew it was going to be like this because when you're picking as high as we are and you're making the type of decision that we have to make, and there are so many options available to you, whether you like them or not, it still exists that these options are available. You knew this process was going to be excruciating. And you're going to hear rumors almost every single day. And, you know, it got a little funky here down the stretch. These final, past week and a half or so was a little bit reminiscent of past years with Snyder and all of the things that we had to endure, and not to say that that's what it feels like, but it gave off those types of vibes with us being in the news for something other than positivity, which this offseason has been filled with. And, it was just foolishness. It was just dumb, but that's part of that wasn't just limited to us. Draft rumors in general are just dumb and stupid, and it fuels the excitement for the actual draft itself. It's almost like a part of what the NFL wants. It's like they build this stuff in and they get all of their insiders and everyone involved in the league into this. It's like they drag them in and say, hey, we need you to build up excitement. So one day you report this, and then the next day you report something that refutes what he reported, and now we go back and forth, and then we need the Vegas odds to be up and down and all around, and it's going to get people's heads spinning, and it's going to build that anticipation and excitement. Well, it's cool when you're watching from afar, right? When we were at 16 last year and we weren't a part of any of that shit, when they were talking Will Levis at 1 and where will CJ Stroud go? Oh my God, his test scores were terrible. We were watching with popcorn from afar, like, this shit crazy. We had 16, so we ain't even tripping, right? When your ass is at 2 and you right in the middle of that shit, it's not as funny now, is it? Anyway, couple of things that I want to knock down tonight. And the first thing I do want to say, though, is last week's show was so much fun. It was a massive success. And I want to give a shout out to everybody who participated. And I just want to take one more look at the mock draft that you guys put together. First of all, I just want to say I am so proud of all of you who participated last week. It was not an easy process. It was a little janky on my part. And you guys still were able to come through and make this mock draft a success. And this is your mock draft, mind you. This is not my mock draft. This is your mock draft. This is your baby, right? I was just the facilitator. I was the middleman. I was the one that pressed the button. That was it. But you guys made all the decisions here, and you did a great job of looking at what Washington had done in their visits and kind of using context clues and kind of figuring out, what you think they would try to do. Obviously, and I said this, when we were doing the draft and going through it, I don't think this is a realistic draft from this standpoint. Not that this can't happen and it can't play out exactly like this, but the likelihood is a lot of these guys won't be available at the time of said pick, right? Like Marshawn Lloyd isn't going to be available in the 5th round. I don't think. I think he'll be one of the first backs off the board, probably the 2nd or 3rd, if I had to guess, in this draft. And that'll take place somewhere in the 4th round, if I had to guess, right? Could even go in the 3rd round because depending on where Blake Corum comes off the board, if Jim Harbaugh is as smitten with Blake Corum as, we're led to believe, and if he loves his guy the way that he says he does, he might take him in the 2nd round. He's been shopping pretty aggressively at the Ravens store, so we'll see what that ultimately turns out to be. But otherwise, this is a pretty, and I don't think Elijah Jones is going to be available in the latter portion of the 5th round either. That's the other one where, like, he's more of a 3rd round, 4th round corner. I can't see him getting out of the 4th round. We don't have a 4th round pick, obviously. So if you want Elijah Jones, probably going to have to take him unless you trade back at some point, which we did. We did trade back, right? We did pick up a 4th round pick, which I loved. I thought the best move that you guys made was an offer that was made to Washington to move back 8 spots from 78 to 86 with the Detroit Lions. Lions came up, got whoever they were coming after. We moved back 8 spots, picked up 123 overall, which gives you that 4th round pick that you're currently missing. I would love to see Washington do something along those lines in this draft to pick up in a pick in the 4th round. I hate having no pick dead center in the middle of the draft, right? The 4th round is right in the middle of the draft. I think it's your last great opportunity to get you a quality football player before we start talking about taking flyers in the 5th round. Right? To me, anything back half of the draft, which is 5th, 6th, and 7th round, now we're taking flyers. The expectations for me, I can't speak for anybody else. The expectations for me are very low once you get past the 4th round. 4th round and up, I expect something out of you, which is why I was disappointed in Antonio Gandy Golden and some of the guys like the last year's draft pick, Braden Daniels. You need to get something out of your 4th round pick, even if it's just special teams contributions. You need to get something out of your 4th round pick. We got nothing out of Antonio Gandy Golden back in 2020. We got nothing out of Braden Daniels last year. We got nothing out of our 3rd round pick last year. So I hate not having a 4th round pick, but it's the cost of doing business. I'd rather have 3 threes than 2 threes and a 4. I'm not complaining about that. I take the extra 3rd versus the 4th rounder that we had, but making the deal with Sam Howell trade, netting that extra 3rd and losing the right to draft in the 4th round. No skin off my back. But I'd love to stay in the 3rd round, keep your 3 3rd rounders, but just move back slightly in the 3rd round and add a 4th round pick. I'd love to do that. And if it comes at the expense of that 7th rounder, hey, you can have it. Now, I know there's this prevailing thought that Adam Peters loves the back end of the draft. He does damage back there. That's great. That's all fine and well. I'm looking for quality players. I'm not looking for guys that you roll the dice and hope it comes up nice. And, you get a lot of praise and accolades if you hit on a 5th or 6th round pick. That's great. But I'd much rather go for the guys that have high value, that are of upper quality, that you expect something from, instead of the guys that you don't expect a ton from. So anyway, I digress. I just wanted to quickly give you guys credit for this mock draft. You guys did a fantastic job. And shout out to you guys for getting it done. So tonight we are going to really focus in on what I want to call rumors, facts, and expectations. Okay, so we've heard a lot regarding Washington, especially at the top of the draft. You know, what they're going to do, what they won't do, what they will do, what they should do, what they could do. It's been highly documented. We've gone through a lot of these exercises already, but I want to cement the final thoughts heading into the draft, like knowing exactly where we stand, what we think is going, or what I think. I can't speak for you. I'll tell you what the rumors that I've heard, the facts that we can actually tangibly touch, see, feel, all that good stuff, right? See, we've heard all of that. You know the mantra. Believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man Louie T. So you already know what it is. But we'll go through all the rumors. We'll go with facts. We'll talk about the facts that we do know, things that we can prove, tangible evidence, and then what the expectation ultimately is, okay, for all of that. So we'll go through all of those, and it will kind of lead us into Thursday night, into Friday, Saturday, etc. And then we'll come away seeing what the Commanders ultimately did over a 3-day period to help make this team as competitive as they can in year one of this recalibration as they look to find their north. So let's get to the first rumor. All right. Jaden Daniels and his camp unhappy with Washington. That's the rumor that had persisted over the last week since the trip to Top Golf. The agent's tweets alone and some of the posts that he liked suggest that they were definitely not pleased with the way things went there, right? There was definitely a miscommunication. They didn't see the value in the group setting. Clearly, Washington did. Others, like Drake May, found it to be a great outing and, very fun, a lot of fun. And as we talked about here on this show, and someone had tweeted out, it was a changeup. It was a pleasant surprise and a change from the norm, right? So some guys appreciated it. Daniels clearly didn't, right? So that's the rumor, that him and his camp weren't very happy. We already know they had a preference and Washington was not it. But it doesn't matter what you want. This isn't free agency, as I mentioned already. It doesn't matter what preference they may have had. The bottom line is, if Washington turns the card in with his name on it, if he hasn't declared that I'm not playing for Washington, then there's no issue. There's nothing to talk about. And he does not strike me as a guy that will do that, right? So here's the fact of that situation. Albert Breer reports that things have been smooth over between both sides, Jaden Daniels and his camp and the Commanders. Obviously, the Commanders meant no disrespect or ill will towards Jaden Daniels and his camp with the way that they set that situation up. They did what they felt like was in the best interest of the organization and kind of evaluating these prospects. Again, some people talked about whether the owner had availability or not, and he wanted to meet all of these prospects. So getting them all in one place at one time was more efficient to have Josh Harris be a part of the process, which he's been a part of this process every step of the way. As he's mentioned, this is his first time, so he really wants to see how all of this works, including being at the combine, which most NFL owners are not at the combine. So I think that's water under the bridge, honestly. I never thought it would manifest itself into a big deal. I think where it became a little bit murky is that they were publicly making it known And when I say they, I use that term very loosely, but we really were more so talking about Jaden Daniels' agent. But they were making it publicly known that they weren't happy. Jaden Daniels is a West Coast kid. He's never been east of Louisiana. He trains out west. He's from the West Coast. He went to school initially on the West Coast at Arizona State. He wants to be on the West Coast. That's his preference. So he's going to be coming east more likely than not if things go the way that everybody assumes they're going to go. And it felt like maybe this was his way of potentially deterring the Commanders from selecting him. If what Albert Breer reports is true, things have been smoothed over. I think the table has been set for Washington to make the pick at number 2. I'll couple this next one with this because it's all the same, right? Rumor: Washington receiving calls for the number 2 overall pick. That almost feels like a fact because we know teams are interested because of the talent that exists in this draft, mainly Jaden Daniels, right? The Raiders are starving to come up and get their guy. He's their guy. They'll do almost anything. Problem is, he's also our guy. So you can't have him. And if the Raiders were drafting at 3, maybe we'd entertain moving back. They're drafting at 13. What are you getting if you move back to 13? I can tell you what you're not getting. One of the top 3 quarterbacks, or 4 quarterbacks for that matter, in the draft. So the fact of that situation is Washington's not trading a pick. And AP, aka Chef P, aka Adam Peters, our general manager, has already said it and made it abundantly clear. Now we're cool here. This number 2 thing is pretty damn good. We like our options that sit in front of us. I think we're going to stay here and make a selection. That's what we thought all along. So the expectation with Jaden Daniels and his camp being unhappy, Albert Breer saying that things have been smoothed over between camp, Jaden Daniels' camp, and Washington receiving calls for the number 2 pick, which is a rumor. The fact is they're not trading a pick. Adam Peters has already said that. And so the expectation is that Washington is going to select quarterback Jaden Daniels, number 2 overall, tomorrow or on Thursday night when they are on the clock and have to make a selection. Now, I will say this. I've looked at the tea leaves, and this is not just based off of what everybody's saying, because what everybody says doesn't move me. Okay. And you guys, if you know me, you know that doesn't faze me one bit. What is interesting is their actions. And that's what has sort of kind of nailed this thing shut for me as far as, is this smoke or is it really a fire? And Jaden Daniels is the pick at 2. So the first thing is, earlier in the process, do you guys recall when Dan Quinn was asked about Jaden Daniels and what he wants in a quarterback? And he talked about what he was looking for, and he talked about the qualities. A lot of what he described was Jaden Daniels, if you recall. But then he was specifically asked about Jaden Daniels, and generally coaches in this position, when you're holding a pick as high as Washington is, and you're going to have to make a decision based off of, your situation, we need a quarterback, you keep it kind of basic, right? Your answer is vague. He's a good young prospect. We're taking our time to evaluate all the prospects, sort of like what Adam Peters has been doing this entire process. He's done a great job. Usually when questions about quarterback arise, if it's a group setting, like he's up there with Dan Quinn or he's up there with Josh Harris, or he's up there with anybody, Lance Newmark, he's like, yo, let me get this, right? Because he knows what to say. And his answer usually is, hey, we're still not done. We're still evaluating all the, it doesn't matter what you ask him. You could ask him, hey, man, I heard that, Jaden Daniels' mom, had some violations when he was at Arizona State, and that's what caused him to train. He's like, yeah, no, we still evaluating all the process. We haven't made a decision yet. Like, that's not even the question I asked you, but that's the answer you're going to get, right? Because it's vague. It keeps the hounds from continuing to ask more follow-up questions. If you don't give them shit, there ain't no follow-up question to be asked. And that's been his answer the entire time, right? Which is, yeah, we're not done. We haven't even started. Like, come on, bro. You at the combine and you ain't started your process and looking at these quarterbacks. Stop it, man. So he's been telling us that this whole process. But when Dan Quinn spoke, he's like, yo, Jaden Daniels is a playmaker. He's dynamic. He's this, he's that. Usually you don't get that from a coach. And I'll take it a step further. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Defensive coaches usually work off of the premise. Listen, just think about Dan Quinn and what he talked about when making his hires early in the process, when he talked about why he wanted Cliff Kingsbury here and some of the other coaching hires that were made. And he said, I just think about, from a defensive standpoint, who's tough to go against. That's how defensive coaches think. Probably more so than offensive coaches. Because a lot of times offensive coaches aren't really too concerned with what's going on defense. Just stop, don't give up a bunch of points. Let me coach offense. Offensive dudes really don't give a shit about defense, other than I want to know how to dissect it so I can make my offense that much sharper and harder to stop. But rarely, I mean, how many times have you seen offensive coaches completely turn their back to the game and focus in on their quarterback and figuring out how to get the offense jump started? There's a game being played, by the way. They're over here sitting on a knee, taking a knee, talking to the quarterback, kind of going through things. Defensive guys are usually locked in, right? There's the rare occasion like Bill Belichick. He'll go over there. He'll take a knee with the defense if they're getting shredded, try to talk some sense into them. But for the most part, defensive dudes are wired differently. Guys that coach defense, they think about it from a standpoint of, man, who gave me fits? Who made it tough on me? That's part of the reason why Cliff Kingsbury is here. Also, when taking into consideration the quarterback, I told you guys a long time ago in this process, and I'm sticking to this. I thought that, just reading the tea leaves, the coaching staff wanted Jaden Daniels, that being Dan Quinn, because in Dan Quinn's mind, who's harder to stop? Who's a nightmare? Who's the guy I wouldn't want to go up against if I were game planning to try to stop the opposing team? Which one of these quarterbacks would I least want to have to defend? It's a no-brainer. And that includes Caleb Williams. It's a no-brainer. It's Jaden Daniels. With his ability to run and his ability to throw the football, but that game-changing ability to utilize his legs as a weapon, that's the guy you don't want to have to face. Nobody wants any parts of that. When you couple that with Cliff Kingsbury having success with mobile quarterbacks, you go all the way back to Johnny Manziel, right? Case Keenum, Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield, then gets to the league, Kyler Murray. There's a track record there of guys that can utilize their legs, especially Murray in the NFL. It makes a ton of sense that it's Jaden Daniels, right? I said a long time ago, this is probably 2 months ago, I think that the staff wants Daniels and the front office wants McCarthy. I have not moved off of that. I think that's been the conversation within the building. A lot of you confused my liking of May and the upside that exists with him for what they think Never confuse the two. What I like and what I think they like, two totally separate, different conversations. Okay. I don't think that has changed. I told you that 2 months ago, and I think that still holds true today. But I think Adam Peters is going to give his coaching staff what it is they want. You guys want Jaden Daniels. He's this dynamic athlete and playmaker. We like what we've seen. It's not that we don't like him. We think this guy's got a chance to be special. We think this guy's got a chance. And then let me continue on that theme of their actions. A long time ago, very early in the free agent process, when they signed Marcus Mariota, a lot of light bulbs went off for a lot of people. And at that time, we tried to quell all of that conversation. Like, going out and getting Marcus Mariota, does that mean something? And, you know, a lot of us said, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It turns out that I think it meant a hell of a lot going out and getting Marcus Mariota. Too many similarities there to ignore. Marcus Mariota, Heisman Trophy winner. Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner. Marcus Mariota, number 2 overall pick. Jaden Daniels, number 2 overall pick. Marcus Mariota, very athletic, capable of using his legs, huge part of his game. Jaden Daniels, very athletic, legs, huge part of his game. Marcus Mariota can tell Jaden Daniels what it's like to be the face of a franchise, to be the number 2 overall pick, to have all these expectations, and to help groom him and help this process be a bit more seamless for Jaden Daniels. Because you think you know, but you have no idea what you're about to get yourself into. This is why you bring in the veteran to have him here to guide a guy like Jaden Daniels. That's what Marcus Mariota was brought here to do, just like Jacoby Brissett the year before was brought here to help and assist in Sam Howell's development. That looks a lot more like an intentional decision back in early March when we tried to dismiss it as, could mean anything. Doesn't mean that they're going to take Jaden Daniels. They could take Drake May still. Too many similarities there for me to ignore. And then the last tangible bit of proof, for me at least, is the infamous now Topgolf situation in the meeting, bringing in all of these prospects. Washington had a whopping 22 guys in at once. But they only went to the airport to pick up one individual. Just one. 22 guys showed up. One guy got the red carpet rollout treatment, picked up from the airport by the GM and head coach. Only one guy got that. You could look at that and spin it any way you like. I think that says more than enough for me. And so, for me, the pick is what everybody else has said it is. And it's not just smoke. It's legitimate fire. And it's Jaden Daniels at 2 for the Washington Commanders. Okay? That's what I see happening. And I've told you guys from the start of this whole process, I'll be just as excited if it's Jaden Daniels as it is Drake May. And shit, I told you I want to win. Jaden Daniels gives us the best chance to win right now. You guys have been talking that crazy shit about winning 10 games this year, 9, 10 games. Some of you have been talking really reckless, 11. You have a better chance at having that happen this year with Jaden Daniels than you did with any of the other quarterbacks not named Caleb Williams. So we'll see what happens. But My money's on Jaden Daniels being the first pick in this draft, or the second pick in this draft. And then the draft really begins at number 3 with the New England Patriots, because it's starting to feel like a foregone conclusion. The Bears are going to take Caleb Williams, and Washington's going to take Jaden Daniels. That's what it's feeling like right now. And I think all of the signs are pointing towards that. So if you're a Drake May stan, put your weapon down. It's okay. It's okay. Put your weapon down. It's all right. You fought a good fight, but it's over now. Lay your weapon down to rest and join us here as a family, as one, and root for this team to be successful so we can leave the quarterback wilderness together. Together. We've been in these woods, hearing our own voice echo, echo, echo. Can anybody hear us? Hear us, hear us. Help, help, help. We've been yelling and hearing no other voice but our own for over 30 years. With the occasional Kirk Cousins or the 2012 Robert Griffin III flash in the pan season. We've had occasional blips on the radar. Brad Johnson in 99. There was brief hope with Jason Campbell in that 2005 range, 2007-ish. But for the most part, we've been wandering in these woods, searching for a quarterback for over 30 years. Hell, 40 years. 40 years since Joey T snapped his leg in half in 85. That's the last time we had a legitimate franchise quarterback. Hell, a league MVP. Put your weapons down. Let's come together, okay? Anyway, I digress. Next rumor. Washington candidates to trade back into the first round. That rumor exists. We've talked about it on this program. You've probably heard other people talk about it on other programs. You've probably read articles that have had that information in there. You've probably seen mock drafts where Washington trades back into the first round. It's a thing, okay? Will it happen? Who knows? But it's a thing. It exists. It's a real thing. It's a rumor. Here's the fact of the matter, though. The board will dictate what Chef P will do, right? But he does have a history of or is a part of groups that have had a history of moving up in the draft to acquire players that they deemed difference makers. Adam Peters is not afraid to be aggressive. He told us that from the jump when he got here. He'll do whatever it takes to take this roster and turn it into one that is going to be competent, that's going to be competitive, and going to give us a chance every single week. You're going to draft that quarterback at 2. You better be willing to protect that quarterback at all costs at 2. Meaning, if a guy starts to slide, and so the expectation there is that if Amarius Mims or some other tackle, it doesn't have to be Amarius Mims. I just keep throwing him out there because of all the tackles, he's the guy that has the least amount of experience. He was the guy that didn't get to have the cleanest post-season pre-draft process because he was dealing with an injury that he sustained at the combine. And so he got to really do nothing this draft process. It wasn't clean. And so he's a guy that you're drafting strictly off of potential, which teams are not afraid to do at the tackle position. But there are other guys in this draft that immediately come in and can play because they started meaningful games at high-level competition in college football, and the tape is there, and you don't have to project. You can see the tape and say, this guy fits and can play at the next level. And there are at least 4 or 5 guys ahead of him, if you ask me, in terms of the tape, right? Clearly, Joe Alt and J.C. Latham and Troy Fatanu and Telelisa Fuaga, those 4 are definite slam dunk guys that if you are searching for a tackle, those guys are there for you to take. And it just depends on how the activity in front of Washington happens. How many of these quarterbacks? Can we get 5? Could we possibly get 6 quarterbacks to go, to put in the first round in the top half of the draft to push these tackles down, right? That's what we want. We want chaos, utter chaos in front of us. That's what we want. After we make our pick, we want shit to go crazy, haywire. Because the more chaos that ensues, the more likely that there's some spillage somewhere that's going to lead to a guy getting to the 20s that doesn't belong there, and that's going to give Washington a shot to then come back into the first round to get their guy. I don't think, and here's the expectation, I don't think Washington is interested in trading up to, say, 15 or 16. It's too high. You got to give up too much. I've seen situations where teams or mock drafts have Washington trading up to 16 with Seattle or somewhere in that neighborhood. You got to give up both of your second round picks to do that. I'm not willing to give up both of our second round picks to do that. I'll give you one of those seconds if I have to. Pretty sure you're not going to get away with coming back into the first round and not giving up a second round pick. I'll give you one of those seconds. And if I got to toss in a third, so be it. But I'm not giving you 36 and 40. I'm not doing that. And I would hope that Adam Peters wouldn't do that either. I understand the value of a tackle, but if this is as deep of a tackle class as everyone says it is, then you shouldn't be willing to part ways with 2 picks that hold tremendous value for this team in this draft. You shouldn't be willing to part ways with both of them. One of them, sure. That's why you got 2 of them. That's why you got 3 in the third. Because if you got to part ways with one in each of those rounds to go back into the first round, absolutely do what the hell you got to do. I'm not looking to have to give up both of those second round picks. I think if Amarius Mims or any of those top 5 tackles for that matter, and I don't include Tyler Guyton in this discussion. I don't think he's a guy worth trading up into the low 20s, into the teens for. I think if Tyler Guyton slides back into that 26, 27, 28 range, absolutely. Then you start saying, hey, I don't know if he'll make it to 36. Let's go get him. Fine. But I'm not trading up to 20 or 21 or 22 for Tyler Guyton. I'll trade for Tyler Guyton at 26, 27, 28, 29. Again, you won't have to give up as much. So I think the prevailing thought for me is that if Amarius Mims or one of these elite level tackles, and I don't consider Tyler Guyton elite. That's me talking. That's not somebody else talking. Tyler Guyton isn't in. So, the conversation we've had about the quarterbacks. There are 3 of them in this draft. And then, some people want to squeeze J.J. McCarthy into that top 3. Fine. If you want to do that, knock yourself out. I'm not doing that. It's Drake May. It's Jaden Daniels. It's Caleb Williams. Then there's a gap. And then you get to the next tier. And that next tier includes J.J. McCarthy. And if you want to say McCarthy's in the next tier by himself, fine. It's J.J. McCarthy. And then if you want to say there's another gap and then there's another tier, fine. Whatever. Like I said, there's 3 guys that to me have separated themselves from the rest of these quarterbacks. And then you can get to the rest of them and put them in whatever order you want. Wide receiver, there are 3 guys that have significantly created distance between themselves and the rest of the wide receiver draft class, right? I think the tackle position is the exact same way. There are 5 tackles that have created distance between themselves and the rest of the tackle class. And then you can sort the rest of those guys out, put them in whatever tiers you want. But to me, Amarius Mims is the last of that group. It feels like that draft in 2020 with those tackles. And it felt like the Buccaneers got the last tackle of that group. And it was like 5 tackles that year. It was Jedrick Wills. It was Mekhi Becton. It was Tristan Wirfs. It was, I'm forgetting one more guy, Andrew Thomas, and I think it was like 5 of them. So Thomas went first, Andrew Thomas. It was Jedrick Wills. It was Mekhi Becton. I'm missing somebody, and then it was Tristan Wirfs, and he was the last guy. After Wirfs, there was a little bit of a drop-off. Not saying that the rest of these dudes were trash. It was just that was that group of 5 or 4, and you had to get one of them. And that's why the Bucs traded up with Tampa Bay. It was only one spot, but they traded up one spot to ensure that they could protect Tom Brady with an elite tackle. They won the Super Bowl, right? That's kind of how this draft feels with the tackle position. There's 5 of them, right? There's Olu Fashanu. There's Troy Fatanu. There's J.C. Latham. There's Joe Alt. There's Talisa Fuaga. And then there's Amarius Mims. And there's 6. So there's 6 of them, right? 6 tackles. There's 6 of them. I'd be willing to trade up for any of those 6 if they get into range. Anybody else, I'm just going to wait for Jordan Morgan at 36. And that's the expectation for me, is that Washington, for the right player at the right position, will be willing to go back into the first round. I don't see them trying to jump up to 14 or 15 or 16 or 17 or hell, even 18. Still too early, right? They're going to let that guy travel a bit. And if that guy somehow makes it to 22 or 23, right in that wheelhouse, that's when I think Washington starts with hitting the phones and saying, hey, what do we need to give up to get to that pick to get our guy? And if it's not there, if it doesn't materialize, if those 6 tackles get swept up, and we know tackles usually get, pushed up the draft board and they go quick, you just wait till 36. Jordan Morgan, more likely than not, will be there, and you take him. And I think that's what they'll ultimately do. So let's get to the next rumor, right? Let's get to the next rumor. Commanders want to add a skill player or 2 or 3 to the mix. And Adam Peters often drafts players they bring in for visits. So that's the rumor. Washington wants to add a skill player or 2 or 3. And Adam Peters usually, generally, often times drafts players that he brings in for visits, or he was a part of a staff, he was a part of an organization or multiple organizations that when they brought guys in for visits, it was a sign, it was an omen that they were interested and they would like to find a way to draft that player if at all possible, if that player fell into their wheelhouse at that particular position of the draft where it gave them the kind of value that they were looking for. That's the rumor. The fact of that situation is the Commanders did not bring in a single wide receiver or running back for any of their official 30 visits. Meanwhile, the tight end position had multiple slots filled with guys coming in for official 30 visits. So you can take that whatever way you like. The facts are what they are. Not a single running back and not a single wide receiver was brought in. Clearly, in a deep wide receiver draft class, either they don't want to show their hand, and I think they're playing a game of poker here, where they got poker face at receiver because they don't want anybody to know or get an inkling of what they're interested in, so that somebody gets this wild cockamamie, idea to trade in front of them to take their guy. So they're not tipping their hand. I think it's brilliant on their part. Or they could just not be interested in receiver. Hard for me to buy that, knowing that our situation is what it is, knowing that they didn't address it really at all in free agency, and then taking it a step further, knowing that Adam Peters himself on multiple occasions has said this is a deep class of wide receivers. Find it hard to believe that they're not going to pick one of these guys. With that said, here's the expectation. The Commanders will look to add, at a bare minimum in this draft, a wide receiver and a tight end. I'm not sure if they're going to add a running back or not. I'm not sure. If they don't do anything with that 7th round pick, I could see if they do draft a running back, it'll be in those 2 5th rounders or the 7th round. It'll be one of those final 3 picks. I don't anticipate one of the first 6 picks that they have in the top 100 being a running back. That I don't see happening. But their activity with their official visits screams to me a team that is definitely interested in adding a tight end. Zach Ertz has been brought in to be a guy that can help facilitate and teach the principles of what it is Cliff Kingsbury wants to do. Ertz made it no secrets. I'm here because of Cliff. I love Cliff's ability to call plays and his ability to get his best players in positions to make plays. That's why I'm here. So what better way to help others on the offensive side of the football, not just the tight end room, but the receivers, the offensive linemen, etc. What better way to help them learn this offense faster than to bring in a guy that's already got working knowledge of this system, right? And again, a veteran tight end is one of the best friends for a young tight end, a young quarterback. So it makes a ton of sense. But also, Zach Ertz can also double, triple, or quadruple as a teacher, a mentor to a young tight end. So I think they're going to draft a tight end just based off of their activity. They brought in a slew of tight ends, including Jatavion Sanders, Eric All from Iowa, Jarrett Wiley from TCU. And again, similar to what they did at defensive end, edge rusher, they brought guys in at different portions of the draft, guys that they see at different layers of the draft. So if we don't get this guy here in the 2nd or 3rd round, this guy will be available in the 4th round. If that guy's not there in the 4th, 5th round, this guy will be available in the 6th, 7th round. That's kind of how they staggered it. They did the same thing with edge rusher. We'll talk about that here in a second. The prevailing thought is that at a bare minimum, they're going to come away with a receiver and a tight end. You should expect that. I definitely expect that. And we'll see what they decide to do and when they pull the trigger on those 2 positions in particular. Our thought process is that it'll happen in day 2, whether it's in the 2nd or the 3rd round remains to be seen. But I think, again, the board will speak to whether it's a 2nd round pick that they decide to invest in a receiver or tight end versus the 3rd round. Like, the board is going to determine that. Rumor. The runway allows for the Washington Commanders to add an edge rusher. So Chef P talked about when you have more guys at a position, it puts you in a position to have optionality to where you don't have to necessarily play a guy right away. That kind of spoke to, if you were thinking about Drake May at one point, that would make sense, having a Marcus Mariota, and having what you have at the quarterback position. You don't necessarily have to play Drake May right away if they were going in that direction, which we don't think, or I don't think they're going to go. I think it's more pertinent when you start talking about edge rusher, however, because edge rusher, as we know, they signed 4 guys. Now, mind you, the cupboard was completely bare. Sans for 2 late-round draft picks a season ago, KJ Henry, a 5th-round pick, Andre Jones Jr., a 7th-round pick. The cupboard was completely bare, sans for those 2 individuals, neither of which are starters in this league. And you could argue the latter probably not even going to be on the roster. Now, KJ Henry has a shot. We'll see. But I have my doubts about him as well. So they went out and they signed Dante Fowler Jr. and they signed Dorrance Armstrong, and they signed F.A. Obata back, and they signed Cleveland Farrell. And we said, okay, that's 4 guys, coupled with the 2 rookies from a year ago, coupled with the kid that they signed off the Bears practice squad that got some run at the end of last year. They're probably not going to do anything. And then Chef P and company cook up this list, and it's littered with defensive ends and edge rushers all over the place at different levels of the draft, similar to tight end, so that if we don't get a guy here in the 2nd round, then there's going to be a guy here in the 3rd round that we're interested in. If we don't get a guy in the 3rd round, then there's a guy in that 5th round range where we got 2 picks that we're interested in. If we don't get that guy, there's a guy in the 7th round that we're interested in. Right? So they set it up to where, hey, we got guys everywhere. You know, Chop Robinson is that guy, fringe 1st round pick, could somehow fall to 36. If he does, they're interested. That's the only guy that I think could upstage a Jordan Morgan. And I'm not sure still, would they pass up on tackle? Because if you don't take Morgan at 36, you may not get another shot at 40. Same with Chop Robinson, though. You don't take him. If he falls to 36 somehow, which I know how he could fall because he got no skill whatsoever. But again, teams aren't necessarily looking for skill at edge rusher. Just give me a guy with the traits and we'll figure the rest of it out. If he gets to 36, I think he's a guy that could make it an interesting conversation. Chop Robinson versus Jordan Morgan, right? If those 2 are both available at 36. Be interesting to see what they did, to be honest with you. But if you can't get Chop Robinson, then they put themselves in a position where right in that 3rd round, where you got 3 picks, Marshawn Nealon is going to be available in there. He's intriguing. He's a different cat, and he's not for everybody. And I don't necessarily know how they would utilize him, but he's different. He's a different dude. Austin Booker is in that same, range in that 3rd round, right? And then if you don't get one of those 2, the Notre Dame kid, John Baptiste is right there in the 5th round. That's right around the range that he'll come off the board. One of those 2 5th rounders. So they've positioned themselves to where edge rusher seems like something that they're definitely looking to grab. So that's the rumor, that this runway that Chef P has talked about allows for you to draft an edge rusher that you don't necessarily have to play a whole hell of a lot in his rookie season. He'll get some run. We don't want you to forget that he's on the team, but we're not looking for this guy to be an impact player right away. He doesn't have to in year 1. We'll be looking for him to take that monumental step in year 2, as Adam Peters talked about in his pre-draft presser last week. So the fact of that situation, Commanders brought in multiple edge rushers at different levels of the draft. I just went through that. So we know they're interested in that position because their activity has told us as much. So the expectation is that the Commanders will take an edge rusher at some point. And I'll take it a step further. It'll be day 2. Like, You got 3 third-round picks. You got 2 second-round picks. That edge rusher is going to be somewhere in that concentrated area of those 5 picks that you have on day 2. That's the guess. Now, a lot of shit changes, and keep this in mind. And this is why a lot of you don't want to trade back into the first round. But again, you got to be willing to make sacrifices. I don't want to hear about wanting to fix the offensive line and wanting to give our quarterback a chance to succeed, but then you don't want to do the things necessary to help your quarterback succeed. If they decide that this guy who's falling currently in the draft at tackle is worthy of going up and getting, and you got to sacrifice, a second and a third to do so, I'm on board. Make it happen. What I don't really want to see them do is sacrifice both the second round picks because of the value of those picks. But if they did that, I wouldn't love it, but I would understand it if you are protecting the investment at number 2 overall. I get it. I understand it. But if you were to trade back into the first round, you lose some of that optionality. You lose some of that ability to grab all of these different positions on day 2, right? So that's the trade-off. So you got to be willing to give a little to get a little, right? They're going to take an edge rusher at some point, barring a trade back into the first round. That could alter plans some. I think if they were going to trim off fat in this draft and not draft a position, I don't think edge rusher is that position necessarily. Could be. But they've done extensive work at edge rusher, and I don't know if that would be the position that they would deem the one that they got to, trim off fat at. But again, we'll see. Lastly, rumor: Commanders not happy with cornerback position as currently constructed. Now, one could argue that that's a fact based off of their actions this entire offseason. Think about this. They don't re-sign Kendall Fuller, so they just completely let him walk away. That was your best corner that you had a season ago. They signed not 1, not 2, but 3 corners in free agency. Now, granted, 2 of those 3 guys are primarily special teams only, okay? The only guy that they signed with expectations of him contributing as a key defender is Michael Davis at the cornerback position. Noah Igbenogany and James Pierre both signed for special teams purposes. They're more so here to apply pressure to the back end of the roster with guys like Sip and the Penn State kid that we got from the 49ers a couple years ago. They're here to apply pressure to those back end of the roster corners who were special teams guys who in a pinch, if they had to be thrown onto the field, would be thrown onto the field, right? We still need another corner. And they've made it abundantly clear. And so the fact of this situation is the Commanders signed numerous corners in free agency. I just gave you the 3 guys that they signed, and brought in multiple cornerbacks for pre-draft visits. And we know they've brought in at least 3 corners for pre-draft visits, including Elijah Jones and Cam. The cornerback from Notre Dame, who I'm not as high on. But at the end of the day, they're showing interest at the cornerback position. So I think that they're going to try to address corner. I think corner might be a little bit later, though. It would not shock me if they use that 100th pick overall on corner. It wouldn't shock me if they use one of their 5th round picks on corner. If you force me to guess, I'd say they'll use one of the 3rd rounders and probably the last of those 3/3 on a corner. I think going into the draft, and again, the board is going to dictate what it is that they ultimately do, but I think they're more pressed at adding tight end, receiver, because remember, most of the damage done in free agency was done on the defensive side of the football. So the prevailing thought is a lot of resources in this draft are going to be spent on the offensive side of the football. They've got 9 picks. I would be shocked if 5 or 6 of these picks are on offensive guys. You know you're taking a quarterback. You know you're taking at least one tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if they took a second tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if they took a second tackle, much like you guys did in your mock draft, right? You assume they're going to take a tight end. You assume they're going to take a receiver. Well, if they take just one of each, let's say they don't take a second tackle, quarterback, tackle, wide receiver, and tight end. That's 4 right there. Now we assume that they're going to take an edge rusher and a corner. So now you've got 3 picks left, and that's where you get, you kind of find yourself mulling over, all right, well, what else would they potentially be thinking about doing? And that's where linebacker, remember, Jalix Hunt is a guy that they are sniffing around, that they had in for an official 30. He's interesting. He fits the DNA profile of a Dan Quinn, Joe Witt Jr. type defender, right? He's very, very intriguing to me. A lot of people have him set as a edge rusher because of his ability to stand up and get after the quarterback. But a lot of the tape I watched, this guy was standing up and he was dropping into coverage and he was running with guys down the field, and he looked like more of a linebacker than he did an edge rusher. So at 6'4", 252, moving the way that he did, he's intriguing. So I think linebacker, and they also brought in Tyrese Knight, and I know they like him a lot. So linebacker, running back, these are other positions that you shouldn't dismiss. A safety, I don't think they're going to add a safety, but I wouldn't dismiss that either. Interior offensive lineman, towards the end of the process, they started to get really interesting with their visits with these interior offensive linemen. So I wouldn't be shocked if they added another one of those guys, even though they've done probably more on the interior of the offensive line than anywhere else on the offense. Like, they spent resources on the interior of the offensive line, whether you're talking about Tyler Biadasz or Nick Allegretti. Remember, they brought in the guy from the Texans as a backup. So they've spent resources, and you still have a 3rd-round pick from last year that you still haven't really had a chance to. And, the thing that's interesting is they don't know. Like, all they know is what they saw on tape, and whether they liked him or not, we don't know last year. We don't know what kind of grade they had on the center out of Arkansas that we took last year in the 3rd round. All we know is that they don't trust him because he didn't play last year. There was no tape, so they don't know. But we've heard guys, I think it was Charles Leno was on John Keim's podcast or somewhere, we heard where he said, look, this guy can play. And as soon as they lay eyes on him and they see what this guy is capable of doing, they'll feel a lot better about what he can potentially bring to the table. So, again, you won't see him until after the draft. So they don't really know what they have. So it may prompt them to add yet another interior offensive lineman. Keep in mind that Sam Cosmi is a free agent after the season. So you don't want to forget that. Who knows if they're going to bring him back or not. So you could be preparing yourself for that as well. Anyway, I digress. My expectation is that cornerback will be on the menu at some point in the mid rounds of this draft. And again, when I say mid rounds, third, fourth, fifth, those are the 3 middle rounds of the draft. If currently we do not have a 4th round pick as constructed, so if you don't get a guy in the 3rd round, and I think of the 3 picks, cornerback would be the last one, that 100th overall pick. If you do not get a corner in the 3rd round, you got 2 5th rounders, and that's where I think you would see them spend a pick at corner. I don't see them waiting until the 7th round to address that. So, we'll see what happens. But anyway, I digress. Let's get to the comment section and see what you guys have to say, and see how you guys are feeling. Essentially, almost on the eve of day 1 of the draft. DMV fan 123. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Right, Patrick Paul or Jordan Morgan, in my opinion, will be our tackle. I think Morgan is the tackle if they go with one of the 2 picks in the 2nd round. 36 is the one that makes the most sense. But again, as I proposed that scenario to you earlier, it could change based off the board, and they may value Chop Robinson much higher than that of Jordan Morgan. And so you heard Lance Newmark talk about, having a great balance, and it's a tightrope act of having, a good amount of need versus, BPA essentially drafting for talent. You got to kind of balance that. And I think if you get to 36 in Chop Robinson, who they probably have a 1st round evaluation on or 1st round grade on, I don't think they have a 1st round grade on Jordan Morgan. I think they would go with the guy with the higher evaluation, which is Chop Robinson. That's what I think. And then if he's gone by 40 and they don't love the tackles at 40, you go in a different direction, take somebody else, and then that's where a guy like Patrick Paul potentially comes into play in the 3rd round. So I could see that being the case. I know most of us would prefer them to have already taken care of tackle in the 2nd round. And if the value is there again in the 3rd round, similar to what you guys did in your mock draft, you come back and you hit tackle again, right? Because none of us truly want Cornelius Lucas starting. Now, I'm comfortable if they said, hey, we don't have any other option or no other recourse, Cornelius Lucas has to play. I'm like, I'm cool with that. But we don't go into the season saying, no, don't do anything else. Cornelius Lucas starting at left or right tackle is fine. It's not how we operating around here. Okay. So, and I'm damn sure not looking to the ex-Pittsburgh Steelers guy that we had last year who showed me a little something. But I'm definitely like when Adam Peters looked us in our eyes and told us, oh, we straight at tackle. I said, Adam. Hey, stop playing, man. Don't do that shit. Hey, stop playing. And then he proceeded to name drop. And I'm like, hey, bro, chill, man. Chill. You can't lie to us, bro. We were here last year. You just got here. You can't lie to us. We know. Don't worry. Your secret's safe with us. You don't have to lie to us. But I get it. You got to lie to us to lie to everybody else. I get it. But we know the truth. We'll see. One of those guys makes a ton of sense. Both of those guys make a ton of sense for different reasons for the Commanders. Mr. Ron B, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Mr. Ron B writes, we've trusted AP to this point. Let's trust him now, no matter who the QB pick is. Oh, I've already told you guys, put your weapons down. This is a done deal, okay? We know who the pick is, but I've said this before. I'll say it again. No matter what the selection is, even if it's J.J. McCarthy, which I would probably lose my shit temporarily, right? It'd take a little while for me to get, just like in life, when something that you expect to go one way and it goes totally opposite direction in a negative way, and it takes you a little while, but eventually you get over it. that's what it would be like for me, us drafting JJ McCarthy. And I would root for him to do nothing but prove me wrong and make me look like a damn fool is what I would want him to do. To just stick it to me every chance that he got to prove that we were wrong and they were right and that he is much better than I and others like myself have given him credit for. But let's just hope that they're not going down that road. I don't think they are going down that road. I'm not really concerned that they're going down that road at this point. But whatever they do, to your point, just support, right? Just support. That's what it's all about. Finesse the plug. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Finesse the plug writes, Louie T. Hey, Lou. First time super. Hey, I love the name. Appreciate you. I've been wanting to know your personal favorite prospects are in each round of the draft. So it's hard to pinpoint like a particular prospect in each round because it's different for everyone. It's hard to say where guys are going to go, but I'll humor you quickly. In the first round, I got two, none of which will be sniffing around, obviously, for various reasons. But Talisa Fuaga at tackle, love him, love him, love him. And then I love Latu. So those are my two guys in the first round. Both will be gone in the first round. And I think those guys have exceptional futures ahead of them. Second round, I think ultimately Xavier Legette is going to go. You know, I'm a big fan of his. I think he's got a chance to be really special. But again, he's extremely raw. And he's got to continue to develop. And if he never learns a route tree, you've got to have an offense that isn't predicated on being precise with route running and that you just A.J. Brown him, right? Like people try to make it seem like A.J. Brown is this sophisticated route runner. No, he's not. He's a bully. And that's what I see Xavier Legette, you know, having a chance to be, is a big, strong, fast, height, weight, speed bully. Like DK Metcalf was, who wasn't a route runner, who still isn't all that great of a route runner. Just get it to him. He'll do the rest. That's what I see him potentially being. And again, does Braden Fisk end up in the second round? Does Johnny Newton end up in the second round? I really think highly of these guys. We'll see, right? Third round, I am a big fan of the Kansas edge rusher, Austin Booker. He's really grown on me to the point where I want us to draft him. Like I'm going to be disappointed if we don't end up with Austin Booker now. Like I have a strong affinity for his game, and watching him develop and knowing that there's still so much growth left with him, but what he's already showing as a redshirt sophomore, who has barely played in his collegiate career. The one season where he got significant snaps, Big 12 newcomer of the year. He's my favorite. I think he's going third round because of the upside. So that's my favorite third round prospect. Fourth round, I've told you guys already, I absolutely love the wide receiver out of Alabama. His name is escaping me right now, but I know he comes with some off the field baggage and you've got to vet him. But he's really talented. I think he's got a chance to be really, really good. And Jermaine Burton is his name. So I like him. I think he's a fourth round pick, is Jermaine Burton. I'd also tell you that the Tennessee running back, with that kind of speed, again, I don't know if he's as natural a runner. Like I wouldn't put him in that same conversation with, you know, some of the guys we've seen over the last few years with some speed that came into the league, i.e. The Alabama running back Jahmyr Gibbs last year that went in the first round to the Lions. I definitely I'm not putting him in that conversation. Jalen Wright is the running back out of Tennessee. But he's another guy that I think is a 4th round pick that I really like. That because of what he can provide your team if utilized correctly. But Jermaine Burton is my guy in the 4th round. 5th round, I think it gets a little dicey as you get further and further and further back. 5th round, I think there could be a few positions that still, because I told you this draft isn't like, and even Chef P said it, after you get past the first, 100 or so picks, and you kind of see a little bit of a drop off in quality. At that point, you need to be very intentional in what you're doing. Now it's no longer BPA. It's, what guy has talent and does he fit a need for the ball club? Or it is BPA where you go, this guy's super talented. We don't necessarily need him, but he's the best value left in the draft for us right now. We're going to take him, right? You just figure out the rest later. I'm intrigued by Jalix Hunt in the 5th round. I think that's kind of the area that I see him going. Also, MJ Devonshire, the corner out of Pitt, there's something to him. I don't necessarily love him as a corner, but I think he's good enough as a corner, and he offers you some return ability from a punt return standpoint that I think he may have value in that 5th round. 6th round, I think that's Joe Milton territory. Think that's going to be good value for a team like Buffalo. I'm like adamant. Buffalo, if you're out there, you got a 6th round pick, which they do, take Joe Milton if he hasn't been taken already. Perfect fit. Sit and develop behind Josh Allen. In worst case scenario, you got you a high quality, backup quarterback in a pinch. If you need it, you can do some things with him, right? I also like Tyrese Knight, the linebacker out of UTEP in the 6th round. I think he's going to be really good value there in a draft of linebackers that isn't very deep and isn't very, talented. He's a guy that I think you can do some things with. And then in the 7th round, I'm blanking on his name, but he's the Virginia State corner that I was telling y'all about, that I had Washington drafting in one of the mock drafts. Willie something. I can't think of his last name. That's my 7th round guy, though. That's my 7th round guy. John Perez, my guy, JP, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Lou, good to see you as always. Let me ask a question about Daniels. If he was always Washington's guy, why don't they come out and say it just before draft day? They hold all the cards at 2 anyway. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't benefit you to say who you're taking. Look, even the Bears haven't admitted that they're taking Caleb Williams. We all know they're taking Caleb Williams, but their GM was flat out asked, Ryan Poles, is it safe to say that you're taking Caleb Williams number 1 overall? He says, I guess you guys are just going to have to wait and see on draft night. Like, he can just say it. We know you're taking him, but it doesn't behoove them. Like, they don't gain an advantage by telling you who they're going to draft. We don't gain an advantage by telling, because what if somebody is willing to come at us with the craziest of offers? Remember that deal that the Saints gave us for the number 2 overall pick for the rights to draft Ricky Williams? They essentially gave us their whole draft. and a 1 the next year, all to draft Ricky Williams number 2 overall. Are you turning that shit down? No, you're not. You're not turning that down. If somebody's dumb enough to give you essentially their whole draft and next year's first round pick, you're going to do it. So it doesn't behoove you to just blurt out, well, we're going to do this. No. Let's see how everything plays out. And you make a decision based off of how everything kind of happens. They know who they're going to take. I think they've known for a very long time who they were going to take. So, again, at the end of the day, it doesn't really serve a purpose. It doesn't benefit them to tell everyone who they're taking. Derek B, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Derek B writes, compare Bears versus Dubs moves in prep for rookie quarterback. So the Bears have done just about everything you can do to put yourself in a position to draft a quarterback. But here's the thing, and it's almost not fair, because Ryan Poles is working off of year 2 of his turnaround in Chicago. Last year was his first year. He came in and immediately got busy. They already started to fortify. They've been fortifying the offensive line now for 3 years. If they draft anybody on the O-line, or if they signed anybody, then that's 3 years of work, because you go back 3 years ago, they drafted, or 2 years ago, they drafted Tevin Jenkins in the first or second round. It was a first round pick they spent on Tevin Jenkins. The following year, they drafted the Tennessee tackle, Darnell Wright. And so they've been fortifying the offensive line already, right? They've already been making moves there to kind of get those dominoes lined up for that quarterback, whomever he ends up being, right? They traded for DJ Moore last year, got him a big fat ass, first year in Chicago where he set career highs across the board. So you got you a stud. Then they go out and they sign another guy in free agency, I think, they traded for Keenan Allen, right? So they got him a couple of studs at receiver. They already got the tight end who they drafted 2 years ago, right? Had a breakout season last year. So they already took care of all the skill position guys, essentially. They went out in free agency this year and signed a running back, right? DeAndre Swift, added him to the mix. So they've already had time to prep for this. So it's almost not fair, right? They're working off of 2 years, really 3 years, but 2 years in particular of prepping themselves for this moment. Whether it was Justin Fields or somebody else coming in new, they were already setting that table. Meanwhile, we haven't spent the resources necessarily on the offensive line. We did on the interior. But, Tyler Biadasz, solid signing. We went the cheap route. We didn't go out and do what the Chiefs did and spend $80, $90 million on a guard, the one they got from New England, that you already knew was an all-pro, that he was going to come in and you knew exactly what you were getting. We did the same shit. At least it wasn't at tackle, but we did the same shit that we did last year by going to the Kansas City Chiefs store and getting some clearance type item, right? Nick Allegretti has never started in his life in the NFL. He's always been a backup. The reason he came here is he said, y'all had an opening. I want to start. Here's my opportunity. They're going to give me, I'm not asking for them to give me nothing. All I know is that you had a bunch of holes on this line at center and at guard. You signed a center. You still got a hole at guard. I'd like to occupy that spot. We don't know if he can play for 17 weeks or not. He was really good, and Chiefs fans have already come in here and said, hey, you're going to love Nick. He's tough. He's this, he's that. That's cool. Same thing Giants fans told us about Nick Gates, and how did that turn out? So we got to see, right? We didn't do shit at tackle. The prevailing thought is that they're going to look to address it in this draft, right? Maybe with 1 or 2. We didn't have to do anything at running back, but they did add Austin Eckler, so that's cool. Take a little pressure off your running back, or your quarterback, rather. They did add Zach Ertz. You can say what you want. He's old, he's this, he's that. He's still a veteran that knows the ropes and can get open and be a reliable target for a young quarterback. I expect them to add there, though. Haven't done anything at receiver, but you came into this situation already having Terry McLaurin, and I still feel really good about Jahan Dotson. Okay? You're going to have to draft another guy, though. That's abundantly clear. So, on one hand, the Bears have literally stacked the deck in the odds of their young quarterback, Caleb Williams. Let's just call a spade a spade. It's Caleb Williams. They've stacked the deck in favor of Caleb Williams. DJ Moore, an established receiver. Keenan Allen, an established receiver. You got an established tight end now who had a breakout season this past year. You went out and got DeAndre Swift at running back. You've already, gone through the process of fortifying the offensive line. You've been spending resources for a couple of years now on the offensive line. So you feel good about what you've got there with some young guys and some veterans mixed in. And then defensively, because the defense needs to be good too. We talk so much about the offense and the offensive line and the skill position players and all, and even down to the coordinator, right? They went out and got a coordinator that had principles that aligned with what Caleb Williams did in college. So it's not going to be this foreign offense to him. A lot of the principles and the things that they're going to do in Chicago fit what his skill set is capable of doing, right? So, and then defensively, they re-signed their star corner, Jalen Johnson. They traded for Montez Sweat. And again, I can't stress to you how that deal they signed Montez Sweat to, how much of a bargain that looks like after seeing what Brian Burns and Josh Allen got, right? Jesus. All of a sudden now Montez Sweat is on a discount, and you just signed him this offseason, or, pretty much right before the, offseason got underway. You gave him that 4-year, $98 million deal or whatever. Dude's getting 30 plus now. He signed for just a shade under 25. So that's a steal. They spent resources in free agency on the linebacker position last offseason. The linebacker from Buffalo, TJ Edwards from Philadelphia. They've been spending resources on that secondary. And they still got draft capital. They got 2 second-round picks. Or 2 first-round picks, through the Bears. So, yeah, Chicago's done it the way you would want to do it. But they've had a process. This is what I've been trying to preach. It's a process. They've gone through the process. The Texans, they were building for C.J. Stroud. This is what I keep saying, which is why everybody keeps saying, look at Houston. They were building. Now, I'm not telling you that the expectation was that this was all going to fall into place and C.J. Stroud was going to do what he did. That wasn't the expectation. But because of the things and the groundwork and the foundation that they had laid in prior years, building that roster, maneuvering, trading up, trading back up, they positioned themselves where they could insulate a young quarterback, bring him in, and have some success. We're in the process of doing that right now. And this draft is going to go a long way in determining how successful of a process it has been this offseason. Because up until this point, it's been a really good process by the Commanders. Well executed, done really well, put themselves, and I said when they were doing all of that in free agency, I said they put themselves in a position to be at their best when their best is required 3 days at the end of April. That's what they've done. Now they got to finish the job in year 1 of this recalibration as they look to find their north. Got to finish the job with the draft. He knocks it out of the park here. I'd say this is as flawless and as well executed and as good as it's going to get of an offseason as one could have hoped for. Finesse the plug. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes? JD, the one we want. Drake May is the one we need. I'll say this. I've found myself watching more Jaden Daniels. More and more and more and more and more. And the more I watched, and some of it was by happenstance because I was watching other players, whether it be one of the receivers or, one of the other guys on the offense, and just watching a game where that guy may have gone off. And I hadn't watched that in terms of Jaden Daniels. You see more and more of what he can do, what he is capable of doing. And I feel really good about what he brings to the table. I already did, but I feel even more. And then listening to his process, right? How he got to where he is and some of the things that he ultimately implemented and the amount of work that he was willing to put in, the sacrifice that he was willing to make to get better. Like, everybody wants instant results. And I can't stress this enough. And I've been saying this for years. Everyone doesn't mature at the same rate. What one guy does doesn't mean that's what this guy's going to do. And you shouldn't hold guys to the same standard. You shouldn't be looking at this player and because, Odell Beckham Jr. in his rookie season had this amount of yards, this amount of catches, and this amount of touchdowns doesn't mean a fellow first-round pick is supposed to have that same impact. Too often we get caught up doing that, though. Compare and contrast, right? Like, I get it. We're humans. That's what happens. When we drafted Emmanuel Forbes Jr., it was human nature that everything that he does is going to be compared to that of Christian Gonzalez because we had a choice to make. They made their choice. Now we got to live with the results. But Christian Gonzalez, to me, was a more natural corner that was going to be able to come in. The only question I had with Christian Gonzalez was, did he want to be physical? Did he want to lay hands on guys and be physical as a tackler, right? But the ball skills, the movement skills, just the natural feel for the position. He was already light years ahead of Emmanuel Forbes Jr., if you ask me. He wasn't even close. So Forbes may ultimately get to that place that the last group envisioned him being. They just didn't have the patience because they didn't have the time. That's on them for taking a guy and putting him into a system that didn't necessarily fit his skill set and then not being happy with the results right away and then benching him, causing him to lose confidence and having that cycle kind of repeat itself. Shame on them. Drake May is going to need work. He's going to need time. And to me, if you're drafting in the top 3, you have time. None of these 3 teams, Chicago, Washington, or the Patriots, are going anywhere anytime soon. Chicago, who knows? I just had a whole conversation about what the Bears have done to prepare themselves to have a chance, and maybe Caleb Williams has a similar trajectory to CJ Stroud last year. Who knows? That's a tough division, though. That's not the AFC South where anything goes and anybody can be the champ. The Lions are for real. And they're bringing everybody back. They're legit. Jordan Love said, hey, I'm here now. I'm here now. I heard y'all was taking attendance. I'm here. What's up? The Vikings, they're going to take a step back. But it's still a tough division. Nobody's expecting anything from us or New England. And both us and New England play in tough divisions, period. The Jets are legit with Aaron Rodgers. We know what the Bills are, and the Dolphins don't look like they're going away in the near future. And we know what our division is. The Eagles and the Cowboys have run the division essentially the last 5 years, let's call it 4 or 5 years, with us just having that one little blip in the middle, right? It has been those two teams really running the division. Don't see that changing this year either, right? We'll see what happens. I don't know if either of those teams will be dominant, but we know those are good teams, right? So we'll see what happens. You should have patience, is what I'm saying, with the Drake May. If you're New England, if you're Washington, if you were to take him, you got time. I get it that time isn't on your side in today's society when you're talking about a prospect, but you got time. How much of it? Because at some point he's got to play, right? Don't want him to look like ass when he does. Don't know. Don't know. Jado, been a member for 6 months. Really appreciate you. Who writes, I still think Drake May is Adam Peters' guy. I don't. And initially I did. I will say that initially I did think that that was his guy. And some of the things that he said, and I think he's done a great job of playing poker face. Like a lot of the things that he said has lended itself to it being Drake May. And Drake May is such a likable guy, right? Like from a mental makeup standpoint, I think he's exactly what they're looking for. But it's going to take a lot. Now they got, and Adam Peters, and again, if there was one thing that gives me pause, which is why I said don't count out Drake May for much of this process, it's the words of Adam Peters. The actions speak to that of Jaden Daniels. But the words, if you are to take them at face value and then take it a step further and try to read in between the lines, the words coming out of Adam Peters' mouth would suggest that Drake May is in fact the guy. When he says things like, when you have guys at a position, it gives you a runway and you don't have to necessarily put a guy out there. Or when he says, hey, if we draft a quarterback and he's not ready to play yet, we don't have to play him. He can sit and we can learn. He can learn. We have guys on the roster like Marcus Mariota who can start. These are things, and again, that's just all a part of the process, playing the game, keeping that poker face, right? Being vague. But all of those things suggest Drake May, right? So again, I think if Drake May, if Adam Peters went with who he wanted to pick, I think it'd be JJ McCarthy. And again, you got to look at the past experiences, and Adam Peters talks all the time about learning from mistakes. When he's made his biggest mistakes, or he's been a part of his biggest, a part of the biggest mistakes of his career, it's all been surrounding a big, tall, athletic quarterback that either lacked experience or lacked the fundamentals, but you just figured, hey, this guy's big, he's got a big arm, he's an athlete, we'll figure out the rest. Didn't work with Paxton Lynch in Denver. Didn't work with Trey Lance. And again, I think Lance is more circumstances with the injuries, but he wasn't overly impressive. But you could say the same thing about Jordan Love in his first career start against the Chiefs. He was awful. And if you just look at that small sample size, you think, oh, well, he sucks. Can't do that. And so with Trey Lance, there's not enough of a sample size. Every time he played a game, he got hurt. But having seen what Brock Purdy did, then I think you bring in Lance Newmark, and having seen what Jared Goff did, I think those two guys were looking at it and saying, man, I don't know about JJ McCarthy. Something about this kid. But it's Jaden Daniels. It's Jaden Daniels. That's what I think. Christopher McLaughlin, my guy, Chris. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Thank you for your generosity as always. Writes, hey, Lou. What's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the family. Likewise. 3 questions. 1 and 2. How do you rate our skill offensive weapons, except quarterback, compared to the top teams in the NFC? And what do you think we still need? 3, what rounds do you see us picking cornerback opposite Forbes and a long-term middle linebacker? So our offensive weapons outside of quarterback, so our skill guys, so tight end, running back, wide receiver rooms. In relation to the conference, at running back, I would say that we're probably with the addition of Austin Eckler, we're probably middle of the pack. Because I really think people are sleeping on, like, this dude. He had games last year where he's averaging 6-7 yards of carrying. He just wasn't getting a rock. I'm speaking of Brian Robinson Jr. Like, he was a dog last year. He just didn't get enough opportunities to bite. You know, he started barking his ass off, and he was ready to attack, and EB just put a muzzle on him, like, shh, be quiet. And then you add in Eckler. I think that's a really good 1-2 punch right there. So when you look around the NFC, the Packers have a dynamic 1-2 punch. The Lions have a dynamic 1-2 punch. The 49ers got the best running back arguably in the league. So he counts as like 3 running backs by his damn self. The Eagles have a stable of backs, and they just added Saquon Barkley. So you put them towards the top of that list, right? So, like I said, when it's all said and done, there are 16 teams in the NFC. We're somewhere in that probably 7, 8, 9 range at running back. Receiver is going to largely depend on what is done in the draft, because on face value, taking Curtis Samuel out of the mix and just leaving you with Terry and Jahan, it's not much, because Jahan just hasn't done enough. We're literally going off of potential with him, and we know he's capable, but you got to still see it, and we just haven't seen it, enough of it. And not all of it is his fault. You know, he hasn't had a lot of opportunity. First year, we saw the potential, and we saw the touchdowns, and we saw what he was capable of, and he got injured, and that kind of derailed a lot of the momentum he built early. But then he came back, and he had some big plays, like the Giants catch and run touchdown in that game in the Meadowlands to send it to overtime. He made plays in that rookie season. Yeah, week 1, right out of the gate. Week 2 against the Lions, right out of the gate. He had like 3 touchdowns in his first 2 games of his career. Even the game he got hurt in against Dallas, he had that beautiful corner for the touchdown, right? We know he's capable, but I'm just talking strictly production. We don't have it. So we can't touch Dallas. We can't touch anybody in our division except for the Giants. We can't touch the Eagles. We can't touch the Cowboys. And I'd say that we're towards the back of the line at receiver, because if Brandon Ayuk is back in San Francisco, you're not messing with them. I'd say that Justin Jefferson, you're not fooling with them. And then they added the young fella Addison last year. You're not touching the Vikings. You're not touching the Bears with the addition now of Keenan Allen. You're not touching them. The Lions, I think we're comparable to the Lions. But, when you start adding in their tight end group and their running backs and all that stuff as a whole, they're better. But we're just isolating wide receiver. We're on par with them. We're on par with the Packers. We're better than the Packers. We're on par with the Lions because of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He cancels out Terry, essentially. So we're kind of in the same boat with them. And they got a young receiver who hasn't proven it yet in Jameson Williams, sort of like what we have with Jahan. And so you can see kind of where that's going. We're going to be bottom third at receiver when it's all said and done. That's why the draft is going to be important. And then tight end, we're at the bottom, and I say that loosely, but we're probably 13, 14, 15, 16 at the tight end position. Our tight end position sucks. Who are we kidding? Dallas has a better tight end group. Eagles have a better tight end group. I would even say the Giants, if Darren Waller has his head screwed on straight, but you can't trust him. So we're probably ahead of them, right? With Zach Ertz on the roster. The 49ers got a better group because they got George Kittle, right? The Seahawks got Noah Fant, and they got a slew of tight ends, actually. So they're actually pretty solid at the tight end position. The Rams don't move the needle. So that might be a team that you could jump in front of. And then the Cardinals, I don't think have anybody. I could be forgetting somebody there, but I don't think they have anybody that's a difference maker there necessarily. I could be forgetting who they took, but the Packers, have a better tight end position than we do. The Lions clearly do with the emergence of their rookie Sam Laporta. The Vikings have TJ Hawkinson. They got a better group than we do. And who else is in that division? The Bears have a better tight end. He came to Washington and cooked our ass. So we know firsthand the Notre Dame tight end. So, yeah, you see where this is going, right? Like I said, 13, 14, 15, 16, somewhere in that neighborhood. We're one of the worst tight end wise. So, again, this draft is going to be critical, right, to the success. And so you asked me, what do we need? I just literally told you what we need. We definitely need to add a tight end. We definitely need to add a receiver. And I expect them to add both. I'd love to add a speed merchant at running back. I don't see it happening. But I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't see it happening. So that's kind of where we stand on offense right now. You asked, what rounds do you see us picking cornerback opposite Forbes and a long-term middle linebacker? So I've already kind of answered that, but just quickly to recap, that third round pick at 100 is where I see them looking corner. Like, obviously the board is going to determine if they're taking a corner sooner than that or later than that, right? But I think that third rounder at 100 is where you take a corner that probably could play opposite of Forbes in the future, you're hoping. And then linebacker is a 5th round thing. It could turn into a 7th round thing, but remember, he's had success, Peters has, I'm speaking of, in, the middle to late rounds at linebacker. So that's his forte. He discovered Fred Warner. He discovered Dre Greenlaw. He found Azeez Al-Shire, 3rd, 5th, and undrafted. So I'd say that I'm pretty confident that with one of those 2 5ths or even the 7th, I'd like to see him go to work at linebacker. And I told you I like Tyrese Knight, and clearly they do too. So they also are sniffing around the Kentucky kid. I'm not as high on him. He's not as instinctual as Tyrese Knight is. And they're similar athletes. Both ran in the 4.6 range, right? So Trevor Patch, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB for 30 months. I got Trev. Writes, Lou, these chats are wild. You must have just gotten here not too long ago. The chat has been wild for months, which is what prompted us to dub this the Civil War. They're claiming JD is Mahomes, Burrow, Vic. Ain't like they didn't learn from someone comparing Howes to Mahomes. You still charging that to my account? That was an erroneous charge to the account. I've already disputed that. They've already debited my account back. So why are we still bringing up old stuff for it, man? Anyway, yeah, look, people are wild, right? And some people will say some crazy shit, some really, really crazy stuff, and throw out some names Sometimes I think they do it for a reaction to see how people are going to respond to it. But yeah, that's ridiculous. He's none of those dudes. But again, we'll see what happens. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, hey, Lou, 2 questions. 1 and 2. What do you think Adam Peters would consider an A grade draft? And what would you consider an A draft and why? I think Peters would be elated to come away with the quarterback, which he's going to. Jatavion Sanders or some semblance of an athletically gifted tight end. A wide receiver at some point. And I think he would probably prefer to come away with 2 tackles if he had it his way. Maybe 2 tackles, not just 1. But definitely want to get a really good tackle, one that you can rely on, a guy that has Pro Bowl potential, if not all pro potential. And then anything else is kind of icing on the cake. You find the edge rusher, you find a corner, like all of that is going to be great. But I think the first thing that he has to do, and I think he understands this, is they have to fix the offense, which is why they essentially kind of stripped down the entire roster and started to build it back up. But while the defense was absolutely atrocious last year, it's always been 1 year on, 1 year off. So in 2020, it was really good. 21, it was trash for the first half of the season. Back half, it got better, but it still wasn't a good unit. 2022, really good. 2023, awful, right? It's always been 1 on, 1 off, right? That's how the defense has been. That entire period, the offense was trash. It stunk every year. And you got to go all the way back to the Gruden administration to find an offense that didn't suck ass. You got to go back to 18 or 17, the early stages of Alex Smith in 18, but you probably really got to go back if you want some substantial good quarterback and offensive play. You got to go back to 17, Kirk Cousins last year. We've been anemic offensively ever since, to be honest with you. So they know they got to fix the offense, man. And if you want to compete, the fastest way to compete is to play good defense while you figure out how we're going to fix the offense. But you're not going to beat anybody scoring 17, 18 points a game, which is what we've pretty much been averaging here over the last 5-6 years. You're not beating anybody doing that shit. So they know what they got to do. So I think he understands, I got to get the quarterback right. I got to get a tackle. I got to find us a receiver. I got to find us a tight end. I got to revamp this thing. And then if you come away with the corner and the edge rusher for future purposes, because, I don't know how much you're going to get out of a corner you draft in the 3rd or the 4th round or the 5th round. I don't know how much you're going to get out of an edge rusher when you got 4 guys ahead of him on the depth chart already, that you may draft in the 3rd round. The expectation may not to be to get, a ton out of that guy in year 1. Those are those runway players that he was speaking. But the offensive guys, those are the guys you're going to need them to come in and help you right away. The receiver, the tight end, again, you're not looking for them to be number 1 options at either of those positions, but you're going to need those guys to be sponges, soak up all the information, and be able to come out and give you something so that you can feel comfortable that next year I don't have to go back to the well again, right? So I would consider an A draft pretty much feeling good about tackle, quarterback, receiver, tight end, and edge rusher. Corner, I don't love this draft at corner. I don't. So I don't know if they find a guy that fits their scheme, great. But love this draft at corner. And because we're not getting one of the guys at the top of the draft at corner, you're settling for one of those. In a draft that I don't already love, you're settling for guys in the middle of the draft. So I don't know what you're going to find. I'm anticipating us walking away with another Benjamin St. Juste type corner. That shit scares me to death. So for me, just come away with all the offensive stuff, get you an edge rusher that you can put on ice, and then anything else is a cherry on top. Be great to get a running back. It'd be great to, I'd love for them to add an additional tackle, 2 of them. But if you just get 1, okay. All right. If you want to spend that resource elsewhere, you want to spread it out. You don't want to concentrate it on just 2 tackles. Would you rather get something else? Okay. But for me, we need to see this offense come to life. This shit has been dead. Dead, I tell you. For the better part of 5-6 years now. So you walk away with players that we feel good, that I feel good with at those positions. You're probably going to come away with an A. Look, at the end of the day, those first 6 picks are really what I'm going to judge this draft off of. You've got 6 in the top 100. I need to feel like you murdered the first 6 picks. Like, we can't even view the body because it's mutilated. You mutilated this draft. It's not an open casket. That's how I want to feel about. You can do whatever the hell you want to do with the final 3 picks. I'm not even factoring that shit into the average of this grade. Okay. Those are outliers. You get something out of that? Great. But really, these first 6 picks are where you're going to get your grade from me at. I know a lot of people love those back end. So many people love the unearthed gem, right? The guy that you find out of, Arkansas State that ends up being a nice story. Everybody loves Cam Curl in the 7th round. That's cool. I want to see what you do in these first 3 rounds, because these are the guys that are going to be able to help right away. These are the guys that we should be counting on for the next. This has been the problem with this organization for far too long, is in these first 3 rounds, in these first 2 days of the draft, for too long, we haven't gotten enough out of these first 3 rounds. So these guys that should be helping you 4, 5 years down the road, 6, 7 years down the road, we don't have any of them. There are no Preston Smiths here. There are no Chase Youngs here. There are none of those guys that should still be here helping us win, because they don't ever materialize here. We don't get it right here. There's no Bryce Love here. There's no Darius Guice. These guys should be still helping us win games right now. 2nd round picks, 3rd round picks, 1st round picks even. No. The Brandon Sheriffs of the world, those guys aren't here. This is where you do that at. This is where you accumulate those types of players that become your core players that can help you win 3, 4 years down the road. That's what I'm going to be scoring in this draft. So those first 6 picks, that's where my focus is. Video channel. Been a member for 9 months. Writes, it's JD all day. Let's rally around a young fella. That's what it is. That's what it feels like, I'll say. Not what it is. That's what it feels like. And their actions have kind of told me that's what it is. If what Albert Breer says is true, and I'm taking it at face value, Albert Breer has turned himself into a very respectable journalist, and he works for a respected, well-respected publication. So he can't just be putting shit out willy-nilly. His reputation's on the line. So I take him at face value when he says he made some phone calls and the Commanders and Jaden Daniels camp have smoothed things out. You're not smoothing things out with a guy that you don't plan on drafting. Like, I'm not calling to tell you sorry if I don't have to deal with you anymore. if that makes any sense. You know, maybe his agent is a guy that you might have to deal with in the future, and you want to smooth things over with him because you've got clients that you're going to have to, his clients, you're going to have to deal with him in the future. Yeah, maybe that's the thing. But I'm not going out of my way to smooth things over with a guy that I'm not planning on drafting number 2 overall. You had hurt feelings about the visit. Tough titty. Said the kitty, but the milk is still good. Right? Anyway. Justin Clemens, stand up. You know what it is. Mob, show Justin what it's like to be a member of the MOBB. You are the newest member of the Mob Squad. Mob, welcome Justin with open arms. Justin, welcome to the squad. Glad to have you on board. Justin Clemens, thank you for being the newest member of the MOBB. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, Lou, if Sean Taylor was still alive, what role would he have in our organization, and does he make it to the Hall of Fame? Hope he gets in posthumously. Rip 21. Nah, he's not getting into the Hall of Fame. He's had a tremendous impact on this organization, but he is just not enough of a body of work to get into the Hall of Fame. He wouldn't have a role, and he's not a guy that would come back and, you know, work for the organization. He would have probably made it to the Hall of Fame, though. That's, I think, his career. You know, obviously it's young. We don't know what would have happened. He could have been beset by injuries. He had just gotten injured. That's part of the reason he was even home when the home invasion took place. So I don't know. I can't say what he would or wouldn't have done, but it felt like if he stays healthy, there's no doubt he's a Hall of Fame player. But no, he's not getting into the Hall of Fame. Got any grapes? Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Got any grapes writes, what chance do you give our wasted fourth from 2023? Look, he was a part of the video. I don't know if you guys saw him on the pulley machine, but he was sitting there pulling the bar down. Braden Daniels was. Look, nobody ever said the kid couldn't play. All right. The biggest issue with Braden Daniels and the selection of him in the 4th round last year was that you were on borrowed time if you were Rivera and crew. You didn't have time for a developmental tackle who was sub 300 pounds to come in and put on weight in his first year, not play. You didn't have the autonomy. You didn't have the time nor the ability to do that. You want to draft him? He should have been a 7th round pick, not a 4th round pick. You drafted him as if that was year 1 of a 4-year deal that you signed and you weren't going anywhere anytime soon. And you knew you were going to have time to work with this kid. We don't know if he can play at this level or not. You know, I talked to people that were at training camp last year and he was overwhelmed. Of course he was. He was 297 pounds. Of course he was overwhelmed last season. My assumption is that he's going to come back to the facility bigger, stronger. He'll be able to withstand practices, the rigors of the NFL a lot better than he was coming out of Utah. And we'll see where he stands in all of this. He may end up being a quality NFL offensive lineman when it's all said and done. He just wasn't ready. And again, so much of that is on the staff and not the player. A player can't help where he's drafted. The player, his job is to try to convince the team to take him as high as they possibly can take him. Like, that is his job. His job is to then try to play to the best of his abilities once he's selected with whatever team selects him. But if he doesn't play well and you overdrafted him, he's going to get scrutiny that he wouldn't have gotten had you drafted him where he belonged in the first place. So that onus to me falls on the staff. Like, we killed Jamin Davis because he was a 1st round pick. Jamin Davis shouldn't have been a 1st round pick. Jamin Davis was at best a late 2nd round, but he was a 3rd round talent. because of his lack of production, and he was extremely raw. They drafted measurables. 6'3", 237, ran a 4.4 40, you know, tested out, you know, that was during COVID. So he tested just ridiculous off the charts numbers, but he was not a natural backer. And anybody watching tape could see that. There were other guys in that year's draft that were more natural, and those dudes are killing it. JOK with the Browns, your boy with the Chiefs from Missouri, Nick Bolton, who I really wanted. There are other guys in that year's draft that were way more natural, killing it. And we still over here waiting on Jamin to figure it out. He had a solid season last year, Jamin, but he's never looked like a first-round pick. We overdrafted him. That's not his fault. If Jamin Davis is doing what he's doing right now in the third round, we'd say, hey, he's been a solid contributor to this team. But again, guys can't help where they're taken. It is what it is. So I'm not mad at Braden Daniels because this team overdrafted him in the fourth round. That's not his problem. He's going to catch the flack because, like you said, it's a wasted pick. It's not a wasted pick. We don't even know if the kid can play or not. He was 297 when they drafted him. Like, they knew what they were getting themselves into, and they drafted him anyway. The nerve of those peasants. One of them has the audacity to still be in the damn building, smiling and keying and shit. Swaggy P, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Swaggy P writes, I'm so glad it's the final countdown to the draft. These last few months have been exhausting. I told you, I said this on my podcast. I think I said it. I might have said it on a different video, but a lot of y'all got y'all asses whooped during this process. And I told y'all before it started, back in like either late February or early March, before this shit got underway, I said, hey, understand what we about to embark upon. We are the number 2 pick in the draft. We are selecting a quarterback. There is no more scrutinized position in the league than quarterback, and we are drafting one in a very talented and deep group. Understand what comes with that territory. And if you were watching last year and saw what happened with CJ Stroud and Bryce Young and Will Levis, then you should have known what was coming our way. And that wasn't as talented a group as this one. So you should have known what was coming our way. And a lot of y'all still weren't prepared. Got y'all asses whooped. He says, I'm fine with either Daniels or May. Prefer Daniels, but it's a hell no on JJ McCarthy. The fan base might riot if we did that. Hashtag HTTC. They're not going to do that. But if they did throw us a curveball, I always tell y'all to precondition yourself into thinking in the back of your mind, just a small sliver of your brain, right? Just give me a small little piece. Frontal, the back, it doesn't matter. Just give me a small little piece of your brain that says, understand that the commissioner could say, with the second pick in the 2024 NFL draft, the Washington Commanders select, and as you sit there with that pause, the first 2 letters could be JJ. You just need to understand that is, I told y'all when this process started, it was a 3% probability. I said it's not moving. It's not 1 and it ain't 0. It's 3. So it exists. Just keep that in the back of your mind. They're not going to do that, though, so you don't have to worry. Kevin, been a member of the MOBB for 4 months. Kevin writes, hey, Lou, thoughts on Junior Colston and Jaden Hicks? Colston could be the first linebacker taken in this draft. I doubt it. But he's interesting. I want to say, I got to check to see if he was able to, because he didn't do anything at the combine because he was coming off of an injury, but he might have worked out at the Michigan Pro Day. I need to go check to see because he's intriguing because we saw with the other linebackers in this draft, did at the combine, and we saw the athletic profile of some of these dudes. And I need to see if, because his instincts and his ability seems like it's on par with those guys, but I just want to put numbers to the film, right? So I got to go back and check him out. But he's one of the better ones in this draft at linebacker. There aren't many good ones. I've already said it's Junior Colston, it's Peyton Wilson, it's Edgerrin Cooper, and I think I got them all. I know a lot of people like Jeremiah Trotter Jr. I'm good. I'm good on Jeremiah Trotter Jr. So there are not many in this draft. He's one of about 3 or 4 guys that are like upper echelon, good, solid second, third round pick linebackers in this draft. Jaden Hicks, haven't gotten to him. Not even going front. I couldn't talk to you about him. Zoe Life, No Life. Been a member for 12 months. Really, truly do appreciate you. Who writes, can we draft 2 tight ends? Nah, that's not in the cards. And that doesn't make any sense. I mean, theoretically speaking, you could, because Ertz will be gone next year, more likely than not. I think this is the last year, because if I'm not mistaken, John Bates was in the same draft with Sam Cosmi and Benjamin St. Juice and all those dudes. I think they were all the same draft. I think. I could be wrong about that. So Bates could be on the last year of his deal. And then Amani Rodgers is a wild card. So you theoretically you could draft 2 tight ends, but do you really need to do that right now? No, you don't. You can draft 1 this year, and if you got to draft 1 next year, you got to sign a guy in free agency next year. You can do that. You don't have to do 2 right now. John Perez, my guy, JP, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, is it possible to go back into round 1 for Guyton? It is, but like I said, I talked about this at the top of the show. If I go back into round 1 for Guyton, it's got to be towards the back end of round 1. I'm not going up to 20 or 21 or 22 for Tyler Guyton. Not interested. I'm interested in Guyton at 26, 27, 28. I'm interested then, right? Because you might look at a team like San Francisco and say, okay, they may be looking for, a tackle here. You could look at Baltimore and say they just traded away Morgan Moses. They could be looking for a tackle at the back end of round 1. So yeah, that there are a couple of teams at the back end of the first round that could easily look to upgrade their tackle situation. And you say, let me get in front of one of those guys. But I'm not looking to go up to 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, or even 23 for Tyler Guyton. He's got to fall into the wheelhouse for me to select him, if I'm being honest. That's how I feel about him. But they could feel totally different about him. Like I said, I'm only willing to go up into that, early 20s range for the top 6 dudes. After that, I'm waiting on Tyler Guyton. And then at that point, I really would just prefer to just wait on Jordan Morgan at that point. Even though I don't love him, I gained a greater appreciation for Jordan Morgan as the process wore on and I watched more tape. I gained a greater appreciation for him, watching him against some of the better pass rushers. A lot of the good pass rushers, the better ones in this year's draft class, played in the Pac-12. And Jordan Morgan was a guy that saw most of them. So you got to really assess what his capabilities were. And he's pretty solid. He's a good athlete too. I hate that he's had an ACL in 2022. I hate that, but it's a part of the eval, right? So anyway, I digress. Anyway, that's going to do it for me, your man, Louie T. I'm so glad that we are literally 1 day away from the 2024 NFL draft. Now, if you're on the East Coast, let me just recap real quick with you guys, since I still got you here and got your ear, what the schedule is upcoming. So tomorrow, mock draft, cornerback video. Hopefully I get to the cornerback video. If I don't, you'll definitely get a mock draft from me, if nothing else. But you're supposed to get the cornerback video and a mock draft video from me tomorrow. Thursday, draft party. Y'all know what it is. We'll be here live all the way to the finish, and then probably well after that, right? Talking draft. So hopefully you'll show up. Major announcement during the draft between picks 16 and 17. So make sure that you're in attendance for that. Don't want to miss that major announcement. Also, Friday, I'm going to be on Bleacher Report live during day 2 from 7 to 11. Okay. 7 to 11 on Bleacher Report. Immediately thereafter, at about 11:05, I've already got the stream set up. And that stream is being brought to you by the Cherry Squad. All right. Shout out to the Cherry Squad. We in the building. Y'all know what it is. It's the after party. After the day's draft is the after party. We at the after party, right? So we're going to turn up because that's the biggest day of the draft for the Commanders. So we're going to turn up. And if you're a fan of a different team, it doesn't matter. You want to talk day 2 of the draft, show up at the after party. We're going to turn up. We're going to be litty. And we can talk about whatever, right? So day 3, which is Saturday, nothing until that night after the draft has met its conclusion. We'll come back and we'll break down what the Commanders did in totality. And so we'll be live that night looking at everything that the Commanders did throughout the entire draft, including day 3, where they only have 3 selections currently. See what they ultimately did with those 3 selections. And then Sunday morning, 11 a.m., Bleacher Report. Breaking down the Washington Commanders draft, giving it a grade, talking about what they were able to accomplish, how we feel about it, and then what's next. Okay? So that is the schedule. You'll hear about it again, more likely than not. But I put out a video, so if you don't recall what I just said, there's a video where I say it 15 million times that I did yesterday. So just check that out. But in any event, y'all know what this is. Post up. Take command. Until next time, you guys enjoy the rest of this pre-draft period. It's almost at an end. Were you not entertained? Were you not entertained? Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. But I know this much. Your ass is exhausted. You're worn out. You're ready for this thing to be over. You don't have much longer to wait. Until then, you guys have a good one. God bless and good night.